Hello, everyone. We welcome you to another episode of the Cosmic Matrix podcast with your hosts Bernhard and Laura Matsu. And this end of the 2020 Wild Ride Year episode is our 50th episode. And we will end this year with a topic that has come up for many people during this very challenging year, and that is relationships. And we will be talking about relationships in the age of Aquarius. And because as everything is topsy-turvy in the world, a lot of stuff is coming up, the dark within and without, we need to also re-examine relationships and enter a new age of relationships and relating in general, and specifically intimate, romantic, one-on-one relationships. And Laura, you asked a question on Facebook recently about this topic, and many people responded, and with many different topics relating to relationships and their struggles. Mm-hmm. So we'll be diving into some of them and give our own insights as well. So let's maybe start with the themes of Aquarius in relation to relationships.
Yeah, I mean, we could go, I'd love to hear you speak about this as an Aquarius sun. But generally, I like to see from an evolutionary perspective, Aquarius is moving away from the status quo. So you have, the previous stage, which is Capricorn or the 10th house, which is seen by understanding the structures of society and going out in society and finding your role within that. And then the shadow side of that is basically taking on society's projections of you, being who other people expect you to be just for the sake of climbing this quote unquote social ladder. So you see with Aquarius, the next stage of that is basically breaking free from all of these structures and patterns of the past. And it's actually a trauma signature, meaning it's traumatic to do so, and you see that showing up in people's relationships, even people who start getting into these quote unquote conspiracy topics, they're moving away from the status quo of maybe their family or their friend group, It's also, I see it as the visionary of the future, almost like the heretic, the renegade. It's also the awakener. And Aquarius is also related to technology and AI and the internet, So there's a certain sense of basically alienation and sometimes even feeling like an alien or an outsider that's kind of a part of this archetype, because you're meant to break free from the social norms that currently exist. And I think you kind of went through that, on your own journey in a few ways too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I felt always, there's the archetypal feeling, outsider feeling since childhood, but it has increased. And then also, once you start, really, as I would say, have the splinter in the mind, as in the movie The Matrix. What is the Matrix? What is truth? What is really going on? And you start to answer the call, so to speak, and seek truth and engage in inner work, then you cannot much relate to the quote-unquote status quo, to the norm anymore, right? Because you see the mechanicalness, you see the conditioning, the programming as you work through your own. How most people live on the illusion of free will and are just not only conditioned by society and culture, but also unconsciously driven by their own wounds and traumas they're not even aware of.
Exactly.
And then, in Aquarius theme, and I just want to also reference, our last podcast, which we go deeper also into this whole Aquarius theme. And why do we call it the Age of Aquarius? Well, there's a lot of debate about it, but there has been recently the Saturn-Jupiter conjunction Aquarius, which started a 20-year cycle.
And then Pluto is about to enter Aquarius, and the next year, I think it's 5 planets are going to enter Aquarius.
7 planets will be in Aquarius in February.
Yeah,
so
and you see this Saturn in Aquarius theme, showing up in people wearing these, I don't even know what they are, these space hats on their heads to try and avoid germs from people. That's a very Saturn and Aquarius thing, because Aquarius on a shadow side is I don't want anyone to be close to me. Yeah, exactly. So you see these, what happens is, and I just want to make this clear with people, is you see these are archetypal energies that filter through humanity, through their subjective reality, right? So you see Saturn and Aquarius themes playing out in the world, whether people are Aquariuses or not, it's playing out in collective themes. And then you see Jupiter in Aquarius, where you do see these people who were truly visioning this great awakening, this future. A lot of people are waking up. I'm noticing it's all these people from different areas too, which is fascinating. And they're waking up because of the corruption in the world, which is like, I feel like at least the very first elementary stage to awakening. And then you start to realize, wow, like it's consciousness that informs reality. And then you have to start turning within, but there is a great awakening happening. And at the same time, I think it was Sal from Starseed Astrology, he made a great analogy that the Great Reset is Saturn in Aquarius and the Great Awakening is like Jupiter in Aquarius. Right. So that's a good way to look at it. The Great Reset wants to like force homogenize this new world order, basically implement that. So I mean, there's a light and a dark to it.
Yeah, the dark side of Aquarius is also it rules technology, it rules AI, transhumanism can be used against humanity, right? It also rules alien UFOs. So that's something to be said. That topic is also coming up on the side note. But on the positive side, Aquarius also rules humanity, groups, community, right?
Yeah.
And like higher values.
The bigger picture perspective.
The bigger picture. And I think that's coming up in relation to relationships. Even when I look at my own Aquarius sun nature, what always drove me in relationships, Aquarius is a air sign, right? Excuse me. So it rules the intellect. So I also felt the need to, whatever relationship I was into, I had to have a common ground in terms of worldview or ideas or just knowledge. Right, in terms of information, so I can talk to my partner about it. Right?
That's why Libra gets along with Aquarius very well, because again, an air sign, intellectual, and able to have that conversations like that.
Exactly, and I think we see this nowadays. What we have seen a lot, of people who work even in our course that we're currently going through, embodied soul awakening, and we'll have another one coming up in February. A lot of people going through a lot of struggle in relationships right now because of what's happening in the world. So there's a splitting happening and people are not on the same page about what's really going on. Some people feed into the Great Reset, the fear propaganda, the COVID and all of that. And other people see through the lies, propaganda and illusion. And if that happens within a relationship, this diversion, it becomes almost in a sense impossible to stay in that relationship. And there's that struggle.
Yeah. Because I think that we are making an evolutionary leap to a new level of relationships. Like the way that I look at it is my grandparents, for instance, who grew up, I think they were, I'm not sure what, I think they're called the greatest generation. The people who like grew their own food and had their own garden. My grandmother got married at maybe 1920, and she got married for purely practical reasons for the most part. She obviously, loved my grandfather in the moment, but, there wasn't that deeper emotional intimacy there at all. So they got married for practical reasons. And then you have the boomers, who got married off, like my parents were hippies and they got married for love, although it was like romantic projection love, but they got married for kind of deeper reasons, because they truly, they were interested and they found the other person unique. So it's more impersonal qualities. And now I feel, some deeper values are emerging out of a need for relationships. But a lot of people I notice are stuck in these same ancestral patterns where they're marrying or not even marrying, getting into relationships for security because they don't want to be alone, because they don't want to face, the inner stuff that comes up when you are alone, because it is a process, to really handle like, being alone, facing those fears as well, because we're such a relationship heavy culture, I think, and yet at the same time, there's no skills that we're being taught, at least in conventional education, that's teaching us relationship skills. So they're planting all of the desire for relationship in our psyche through culture, through movies, through television, through music, yet at the same time, they're not telling us how to be in a relationship.
Yeah. And it's very emotionally driven in the sense of just like mistaking romance for love, for example, right? When the chemicals hit and in the romantic phase, which is natural, you project a lot of positive qualities on the partner, which he or she doesn't necessarily have. It's like positive shadow projection, the golden shadow, as Carl Jung would say.
Yeah.
Right. And then most people then become disillusioned after the romantic phase is over and realize, oh, my partner's not who I thought he or she is. And then people usually break up.
Yeah.
But they don't make the step towards true love because they mistake this romantic infatuation with love.
That's why I think it's really important to really get clear on, number one, do you want a relationship is the first question to ask yourself. Do you want to get married? Like, what do you actually want? Like, really be honest with yourself. Because a lot of people pretend like they really want a relationship, but they'll never say it, So just get clear on that, And then also ask yourself, like, what are my values? Like, what kind of life do I want to have? What do I bring to the table as well? And get clear on this before you enter a relationship. Otherwise, you end up in a relationship with the first person who you're attracted to or circumstantially end up meeting, and there may not be an alignment. It's like there's a reason why I think it's really important to get clear on these deeper values before you even enter a relationship, because it's very easy, especially when you're alone and you're isolated and then someone starts showing you attention, to fall into relationships with the wrong person. And I know this for anyone who has astrology. I have like a 5th house South Node stellium. So I used to do this over and over again. Like whoever was the most romantic situation, it wasn't even romantic. I was just inventing it in my brain, by the way. But whoever was around, I would just be like, okay, this seems like a good idea. Because like the loneliness can be really hard, But I have to say, before we met, I had to go through so many initiations with loneliness and really get to the root of what was there. And at the root of it, it's loneliness, feeling separate from God and feeling separate from some higher power, basically. That's where it comes from. And a lot of people are basically, this is where the romantic projection comes from, is they project like their experience of God, of union in a relationship. Like I can only experience that in a relationship. And then that's where the trouble starts.
Yeah. And also what you mentioned, very important to know your values. But you can only know your values if you know yourself. Know
exactly,
thyself. That's
exactly.
the key point.
Yeah.
So it creates a certain level of self-awareness and self-work, right? To know that and work through your stuff, right? Because everything will come up in a relationship even tenfold. And so...
Yeah, you have to do that self-work as a basis. Like a lot of people... sorry, you're going to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, what you mentioned in the past, people were, attracted through on certain levels, maybe on just one or two centers, if I want to relate it to the what we also talk about in our course, the fourfold approach of holistic self-work, physically, emotionally, psychologically, intellectually, or spiritually. And most people, they get into a relationship, like you mentioned before, like just common interest superficially, and some emotionally, maybe mostly even sexual attraction, that's it. But what I feel is coming up now, necessity, even the age of Aquarius, to relate or to have a common ground on all levels, right?
Yeah.
Physical, emotional, intellectual, and spiritual, right? So to be collinear, to look in the same direction. We've mentioned it many times before, and the quote is very profound by, I forgot the author's name, but the author of The Little Prince said that love is not looking into each other's eyes, but into the same direction.
Yeah.
Having that foundation, which doesn't mean to be exactly the same.
No,
right? But have this bigger intent and a common ground, that foundation. If that foundation is not there, the relationship will disintegrate.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And that can be hard for people who have already entered into some level of committed relationship, and then they start to kind of veer onto the path of like self-growth, the spiritual path, and self-knowledge, and the other person doesn't want to do that work, That's
a big one.
Like, that's huge. Like, in my view, there was a certain point I felt like I was actually on the edge of like a cliff, I was actually like at least 5 years, maybe, around that, into my own spiritual path and spiritual journey. And then I knew at a certain point, like, if I cross this barrier, there's no going back. I'm not going to be able to just date normal, quote unquote, people who aren't aware of these, or who aren't aware of themselves, who aren't on this path, and I had to take that leap. And there's a certain deeper level of commitment, I think, to self-work and the spiritual path, which needs to happen, because it is a It is you're on this path of awakening. Sometimes you have to be alone. Sometimes you have to do the thing that's hard and you have no idea where it's going to lead, So a lot of people still ingrained into them are on this kind of security thinking in their relationships. Like their relationships provide them some sort of sense of security, but doesn't provide them this deeper depth. And they're on this path and the paths are diverging, and they're not able to take that leap.
Exactly. And that's what we experience a lot of people we work with, be it in a one-on-one sessions or even in our group online courses, that one person, in a relationship, one person joins and is quote unquote waking up, engaging in the work, being aware of what's really happening in the world, seeing through the lies and propaganda, and the other person, their partner is not.
Yeah.
And what happens most often that, they, have this hope like, oh my God, like if I do this, then hopefully he or she will wake up at some point too. And, but there's a friction.
Yeah.
And, we would never tell people what they should or shouldn't do in a relationship, be together or break up. That's everybody's choice. But out of experience, having worked with many people, if one person is not sincere, is only engaged in the work and the other not, the relationship will eventually fail, or it will become
it may not fail, but they can stay together.
That's what I was trying to say.
Yeah,
they may try together, but it's like it becomes just routine and just, how can I say it? It just becomes like almost an avoidance.
Yeah, because you have to look at it like the way that I see it, and this is also why I'm really like mindful of the people I surround myself with. Is like, you don't operate as an island to yourself, although you may think like that. Every single person around you affects you, and the people that you choose in a relationship, that you choose as friends, like this is like your ecosystem. They either support you or they drain you, So if you're on the path of self-work and the other person that you're with is acting out super unconsciously, and you're not able to point out that or work on them with it, then obviously that's going to drain you. It's just a reality.
Exactly. Because when we look at intimate relationships, being married or living together, boyfriend, girlfriend, if you're that close together with somebody, this is essentially the most important person in your life.
Yeah.
Your main advisor. And especially now that's coming up now more with this world situation, the lockdown, the isolation, and couples are more closer together, more shit, quote unquote, is coming up.
Yeah.
So, but the person you really surround yourself is going to affect you. So if you're not on the same page, excuse me, that can result in a lot of, I would even say, unnecessary struggle in a sense that could be avoided, if we just really, truly make more decisions that are really based on our true self and not because of habit. Or security.
Which implies that also fostering the relationship with the true self has to come first,
Which relates to relationship to the divine.
Exactly. Ultimately. And so let's get into some of the things that people really talked about on the post that I made. So the first thing is about self-responsibility and doing our inner work in relationships. Someone asked us to speak about that. And I mean, that's super key. Like in the course that we just gave like a module on triggers, and I told people, I was like, if you can master, if you avoid the rest of the program, but you focus on how to process your triggers in a conscious way, it will change everything in your relationships. Because it's literally the opposite way of how most people operate. Because imagine, and let's just give an example, so imagine you are on this path of self-work and you learn how to process your triggers in a more conscious way. But then your partner is like blaming you for everything, and then you're processing that consciously. Then what happens is you end up in this almost emotionally abusive relationship where one person's treating the relationship as a conscious being and the other's not, But
the other person can be hijacked by other forces, but we'll get into that deeper.
Yeah. So
later.
Just speaking, generally speaking, because this is kind of a general question, in relationship, you are responsible for how you feel 100% of the time. Doesn't mean that the person may not say something that's hurtful and harmful and you can communicate that to them. But from what I know, the stronger the emotion that's there, the more that this is something from the past that's showing up in the present. And by its very nature, if you want these deeper, emotional, intimate connections, you are going to be in a relationship or marry someone who's going to trigger you the most. It's just a reality. It's a weird fact about how they'll bring up all of your parental stuff, all of your childhood stuff, because that's the nature of any deep relationship, is that there's going to be a certain amount of triggers there. So just let me finish.
Okay.
So it's really important that, you have some sort of tool to process the trigger in the moment. And just to give people a little, quick overview, number one, it's being able to tell when you're triggered in the first place, i.e., what's going on in my body, what's the emotion that's there. Can I get away from the story of the trigger? What am I making this mean about myself? How do I, who does this person remind me of? Self-inquiry. It's literally turning all the energy that you would normally externalize onto your partner and be like, you said this, I got triggered, it's your fault, and using it as a process for inquiry, At the same time, and this kind of leads to this other part, is having the communication skills and also having the partner who's open to hear that, So you have to be able to communicate in such a way that you're taking ownership of your own experience and you're able to communicate what's going on with you in a way that's not blaming them, and also having a partner who's willing to hear that. Because if a partner isn't willing to hear your deeper emotions, why are they even with you? Like, seriously, like that's a question to ask yourself. Because to me, I have Venus and Scorpio. Like, if a relationship doesn't have deep emotional connection, I'm not into it. Like, I don't want like a superficial relationship. Maybe if you have a Venus in Gemini, you feel differently, but...
But, that brings me to the topic in general about shadow work. And shadow work is the name of the game. We've talked about a lot, even shadow work, many people talk about, it's kind of hype, but I still see not many people really understand the really basic principles of negative and positive projection, how to work with triggers and how any trigger ties into our unconscious trauma wounds we all carry to varying degrees, or unconscious core beliefs and whatnot. And it's easy to talk about shadow work when you're not triggered, because that's where the rubber hits the road, to apply it when really it gets messy. And that also reminds me of like the need to deprogram ourselves, because many of us, I feel, are still somewhat programmed or conditioned by official culture, Hollywood, that relationships are just bliss, love, and light, and just this complete harmony all the time, which you can, quote unquote, you can have like a superficial harmony on like the outer layers, right? But a really in-depth relationship, a deeper spiritual relationship, to use it as a crucible, for alchemical transformation, will bring up your stuff.
Yeah, that's the point.
And if one person is doing the work in a way of shadow work, the other not, it's bound to fail. It's gonna, it's actually,
you're using such strong language. You're like,
sorry, but it's I would say, I speak out of my own experience as well. Don't want to project it onto others, but it is almost self-abusive in the sense.
It is. It does. That's the issue. It does become self-abusive, because if your partner is like laying their own triggers and blame on you and making you responsible for their happiness, and you're constantly processing that consciously, it's almost like you're trying to take on their work for them, and it doesn't work, because you just end up in this imbalanced relationship, basically. Yeah.
So on that note, like this higher relationship, which everybody's yearning to, on some degree, even unconsciously, requires self-responsibility for both partners and 100% commitment to the work.
Yes, exactly.
That's what it comes down
to. And the work meaning the growth process, and being like, I understand that this relationship will trigger my relationship with my opposites, both sex parents, actually. It will trigger stuff in my early childhood. And I'm going to take ownership of all of the projections that I have about you and become curious about them rather than blaming you. So this also takes a certain level of, I think, mindfulness, because I know for myself, it's like, you have to be able to pause and be able to, because most people have so much chaos going in their mind, they don't even realize the projection is happening.
Right.
So you have to have these moments to pause and to self-reflect. For me, it also happens in meditation where insights come up and I realize, wow, like look at what I'm layering on. And not only that, the emotional intelligence to be with your strong emotions in a somewhat more conscious way, so you're not just mechanically acting them out, because those are the biggest materials for growth. And so, and to just also welcome it. Like when before even we met, when I was in India, I remember like I had so many projections come up about you that I had to literally sit and meditate with. And it was almost like I was like watching a movie of my past in my brain, and these projections were overlaying on the person who you actually were. So you were reminding me of people from my past and all sorts of things, and I had to just sit and witness them in order to basically watch them dissolve and fall, But for many people, that projection is the reality of who they want that person to be. And then they're constantly trying to change that person to live up to that projection.
Which I also used to do.
So you have to also be willing to like get to know, who is this person? Who are they really? Can I be with them without trying to change them?
That's a big one.
Is really huge, because we often project all of our unmet needs from childhood onto our partner. It's a natural, healthy mechanism. You can't even stop it, but you have to become aware of those projections as well.
Yeah. Which also reminds me now in terms of what you mentioned before, having our values, knowing what we truly want. But there can also be a quote unquote trap in that, in the sense of like having this ideal partner, this dream partner you envision, and projecting all these qualities.
Yeah.
Right. Almost like unattainable, basically. So also for self-reflection, do you have those qualities yourself? Because a lot of people looking for like, I want this conscious partner who's this and this and that and doing this. But are you that yourself, first of all? Like
Look,
this
can you
honest
bring that to the table?
Honest self-inquiry.
Yeah, yeah. And then also a lot of people do that because they are using a relationship as a distraction to actualizing their potential. Because if we look at it, sexual energy is creative energy. It's also the energy that you need in order to self-actualize, So you can either direct that to relationships or one night stands or whatever, or you can direct that towards actualizing your potential. And what usually happens is people are too scared to actualize their potential. They're too scared of what they could create of themselves, so they end up just derailing into relationships.
And it's unconscious.
It's super unconscious, and it's also a way of avoiding their own deeper self-work, So it's really important, I think, if you want to enter into a more conscious relationship. Doesn't mean you have to like be living out your purpose 100% in the world, but at least be self-actualized to the point where you feel confident and comfortable with yourself.
That you don't use your partner as your quote unquote purpose.
Exactly. And I think for women that's more dominant, because I think as well, especially you got to look at your mom's relationship with your father. You have to look at your grandparents' relationship, like what was there, because this is also stuff that's encoded into your own behavioral patterns in your DNA. And I know because I had to work through it myself, so you have to look at those patterns and how they impact you, and like what was your parents' relationships to each other, how is that overlaying on your own relationships? Because what we're doing, and I feel again this goes with the theme of collective relationships in the age of Aquarius, is we're breaking free from this kind of status quo relationship,
right? Like
the kind of relationship that you just have because at Christmas dinner because it makes you look better to your cousins or your family, That's the kind of relationship we're breaking free from, and we're more moving into Aquarius. Venus in Aquarius actually rules a little bit unconventional relationships when you look at it, So we have to kind of think outside of the box of relationships as well.
Yeah, and let's put in the relationship, no pun intended, with what's happening in the world right now. Because we're seeing with the lockdowns again and all of that, the isolation and the splitting of humanity, so to speak. And there are many people more isolated, more alone, right? That's really tough on them during these times, having nobody they can relate, no partner, even no friends. So there's a lesson behind it, also the lesson of solitude and strengthening your connection to the divine. There's an opportunity. And then on the other side of the coin, like I mentioned before, the relationships, couples, but within them, they see a friction. They see that they don't align their views. Some, like we mentioned before, some people buy into the whole official story and the lies and propaganda, and others see through it.
Yeah,
how can we reconcile that?
Can I read the question we got about that? I won't read the name, but you and Bernhard spoke already about the splitting of humanity. Any tools or advice on how to handle this within a marriage, with your kids, with close family? It's not always simple to just unfriend or block and move on, since they will always be a part of your life. Interesting presupposition there,
Right.
by the way. Because the thing is on the spiritual path, every relationship is up for analysis. Is this serving your growth? So I just want to say that, because they will always be a part of your life. No one will always be a part of your life. And you have agency and you have autonomy over gets to be a part of your life, regardless of what society or friends or the status quo tells you. So in my experience, it brings up possibilities for a normal conversation to a halt, and hence the split only grows bigger, making the situation worse. In the past, it was difference of opinion on the controversial subjects, but this past year, it's really a splitting in humanity with two sides unable to communicate or understand each other.
Yeah.
And so, there's a few things there. Yes, within a marriage, with your kids, with your close family. Are they really close if you can't talk to them about what truly matters to you in an open way where they accept you? That's the question to ask yourself, is because I feel that the question that's really coming up for people, and this is something Gabor Mate really talks about very well, is this choice between authenticity and attachment. So I'm just going to go into that a little bit. And this is also something that we really dive into from a trauma perspective in our group program. And by the way, if anyone's interested in that, we're doing our last live in-person round in February. So don't wait on it, apply to this one, because we're not going to be doing it in person again.
It's limited to 25 people and by application only. And you can apply at awakenapply.com.
Yes. So just as a side note, there's a correlation between trauma and attachment and authenticity. And attachment means like any attachment relationship you have to your parents, to your partner, etc. So as children, we most often adapt to the parental expectations to who they want us to be. Regardless of how toxic they are, regardless of whether we're that person or not, we adapt it to avoid the experience of danger. So if your parents expect you to be the straight A student, you try and adapt to this golden child image of them in order to feel safe in the relationship. So we don't risk the danger of the disapproval of our attachment figures because we depend on them for survival, So we end up choosing attachment over authenticity, meaning we choose to be a false self to our attachment figures over being truly ourselves. Because being truly ourselves, we would risk disapproval, we would risk being punished, criticized, failing to meet their expectations in some way, and that's too painful for the child to go through. Not only on a survival level, they depend on their parents. So we choose attachment over authenticity. And then later on as adults, we continue on this pattern of choosing attachment, living as a false self, or living out the image that people want us to be over authenticity, being truly ourselves. So, and Gabor Mate has this really great quote about this that really summarizes it. So we suppress our authenticity because we want to avoid the pain of not being loved. By suppressing our authenticity, we create suffering for ourselves. Then we get into situations in life and relationships which are not authentic for the sake of attachment. Now, it's inevitable, almost inevitable in many situations, that if a person is moved towards authenticity, it's going to create the pain of maybe losing or threatening an attachment. They are going to have to be able to handle that pain. If they can't handle that pain, they are going to stay suppressing their authenticity, which means they're going to create more suffering for themselves. So there is no painless authenticity.
Yeah.
And just to complete that thought, this is what happens, is like every single choice you make on self-knowledge, self-growth, the spiritual path, you are changing yourself. And so the system around you will have to change if you want to be true to those changes. Otherwise, you're going to end up going along with the old you, the old status quo, and you will suppress your authenticity for the sake of attachment.
Yeah. No, very well said. And it's very important to understand. And Gabor Mate goes even deeper with that and further. And he has even also worked with terminal patients, cancer and patients and all of that. And he noticed the interrelationship also between people developing severe illness,
cancer,
and even prematurely, quote unquote, dying, because they chose attachment over authenticity. And it really has some talks how inauthenticity can kill you over time, ties into the people pleaser syndrome. So the more you suppress your authenticity, which is ultimately from the spiritual perspective, your true self, who you truly are, your soul purpose, you create inner friction. So you are different deep down inside than you appear on the outside. and that results in more entropy, right? And can stifle your life force, and then eventually manifest in serious disease as well.
Yeah, because you're suppressing your emotions on a day-to-day basis. Like, when I talk to family members who I can't be authentic with because it would just create so many arguments, and it just like I feel a discomfort. I actually have to check out of my body in order to do it. I don't do it that often, I have to say, because at this point I'm like, everything has been up for me for a long time. I don't follow along with like this idea like, oh, all the family needs to get together for Christmas and pretend that we're all a big happy family. Like for me, I'm like, do I feel authentically like I want to connect to these people? I actually tune into my true self and ask my true self that. And then again, it's going, I am going against the status quo. There's certain family members I didn't call for Christmas because I didn't feel authentically drawn to do it, even though it was a socially acceptable thing to do, because I really had to be true with what was authentic for myself. And if these people in my life cannot show up with a certain level of consciousness and are still replaying the same patterns, then I'm sorry, like, as painful as it is, and it is painful, it is emotionally painful. I have to say that, which is something that Gabor Mate pointed to. I have to let these relationships go. Yeah. That's what it comes down to. And it is like, you do feel, and I've had to deal with this in my own soul journey, like you're a ship out at sea with like no one else, because we use these relationships as a form of security, basically.
Yeah. So let's, go what this person said about how to handle this with their marriage, kids, your kids, or close family. What you mentioned by just close family. And this person said, because they, made this assumption since they will always be part of your life. Really? Is that so? That's kind of like
no one will always be part of your life.
First of all, and that's kind of, again, like a social condition thing, like the idea of obligation. Oh, it's my family, and like, and we need to stay close and like ignore all these things. And there's this, just obligation, there's inauthenticity. Yeah. And it's not about disregarding. Yeah, this is about caring for family, but this is where I feel the age of Aquarius comes in, like to transcend these beliefs in a way, or attachments, and go into higher values, and see it in the terms of spiritual family, right? I'm closer with friends and people I surround myself than many parts of my family, even my parents,
exactly,
right? And even if you have, like in your case, very difficult relationships to family, even that included past abuse, and they were never able to work through it, and they checked out and still are not very there for you, and it brings up too much, it's totally, absolutely fine to make boundaries with family members, and not live this obligation, just because it's family, I have to be there and call them and be around. No, you can make those boundaries.
Yeah, especially if it's like, toxic beyond the point of repair. And I don't mean just even outwardly toxic, like they're abusive, If they're constantly shutting down your light, if they're constantly, like making you question your own self-worth, again, you're blaming someone for how you feel. But I mean, if they're acting unconsciously in such a way that it's harmful for you over and over again, eventually you got to be like, it's like the person who keeps touching the stove even though it's hot. It's like, aren't you going to realize that this relationship is based off of suffering, And I think that it's really important to be able to hold that pain, and also, develop some level of emotional self-sufficiency, that you're okay even if you don't have anyone in your life. Like I had to go through that initiation period, and I was also very relationship obsessed, but I had to go through this and it was extremely painful, this extreme pain of being alone for at least like, I don't know, it was a while actually. I didn't got in a serious relationship since 2012 before we met, and it was like the kind of inner process and alchemical process I had to go through. I mean, it was amazing. It was initiatory, but there was like some deep soul pain there. And I think that's actually what people are avoiding, Yeah.
That's again, there goes the attachment versus authenticity. Like Gabor Mate pointed out, by choosing attachment or the authenticity, they think they're going to avoid pain, but it's going to be painful no matter what.
Yeah.
It's even worse when you choose attachment of authenticity for reasons I mentioned before. But true authenticity will bring up stuff, right?
Yeah.
It will bring up possibly being rejected for your true self. That's what brings it up.
Yeah.
And then with regards to within a marriage, right? how to handle this within a marriage, because they're part of your life, and you can see boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever, just a relationship in itself. And in light of the age of Aquarius and those values, like for me personally, that's my own experience and my own opinion. I remember in relationships, if it goes back to having your own values, if that person was not like, with that work I'm into, what I'm about, and my writings and whatnot, and my worldview and seeking truth, if that person is on the same page about that, I lose interest right away. Mm-hmm. That's been the big thing. All relationships, like I didn't care about any like social, fun, sex, emotional, whatever. If that is not the foundation there, especially this day and age, I could never be with somebody right now. It would drain me. It would just like deflect me.
Yeah.
Has this the foundational worldview.
Draining is the key word, because if you build up your life force through intentional self-work and spiritual work, and you have an environment where people are just checking out and they're suppressing and avoiding their emotions, that just drains you as well. Yeah. And like it's the cost of living an authentic life. So, it's really important to, I think one of the greatest skills on the spiritual path is the capacity to hold pain, to be with painful emotions, to be with triggers, and to just literally just be with it and feel it, because a lot of our culture is based on trying to avoid pain. So if we can become better at holding the container of pain, of growth, of difficult choices that we may have to make, with compassion and with intentional self-work, whatever we do to need, but just be with that pain, that constitutes healing, in my opinion. Yeah. So that kind of leads to there's another question: how to navigate differences in fundamental beliefs within relationships. So spouse, family, friends. I mean, that's okay. I feel like everyone has different beliefs in relationships. We all have different worldviews, and then again, like, are you able to meet on common ground and common levels? Because different beliefs is like, we all have different beliefs. I feel.
Yeah, I mean, we have different opinions here and there, but the key point is have the foundation of a common ground. You know what I mean? Like if you would be like walking around with mask here and being paranoid about the virus and getting into TDS and all of that. Yeah, that would be. It would not work.
Yeah, exactly. Period. So like, I know this because I do have family members who I do still really love and appreciate for who they are and their essence, and there is a genuine, care for them. Yet at the same time, I know that they watch the mainstream news and they're very conditioned by what they see on there. And so our beliefs diverge there, but you can still, I think this is really important, so you don't get into like the sense of spiritual superiority and you're like, these people are asleep, I'm not going to relate to them. But there's still a level where you can relate to the essence, to the soul that you have that relationship with. So, but like if you're combating on the belief level, I mean, this is also like almost like an archetypal struggle that we deal with in humanity. And this is why wars get made, where we like have one belief, and another belief goes against it. So I think this is really important, and also for the bigger picture perspective, that we have to understand that everyone has their own belief system. Sometimes they create this belief system to protect them from pain. And if we can kind of see this, we can develop compassion for them as well. Because if our beliefs are so fragile that someone disagrees with us and we get really upset at it, then we have to also question the nature of our relationship to our beliefs to begin with, And
I want to mention that now with the splitting of humanity that's happening right now, really this divergence, it's almost impossible to try to convince other people via logic, facts, and information alone.
Yeah.
If that would be the case, we would be easily already enlightened and all that. So being unable to communicate and not understand each other, that's where the higher vision comes in, as you just mentioned, and being able to let this person be and let this person go. Because if we're trying to force a relationship just because of this attachment issue, you're not only, it's almost you stifle not only your own progress in life and purpose and get stuck, right? But also the other person as well. And sometimes letting go is the best thing we can do, and not let our ego attachments kind of get in the way, or the need to be right. It ties into external consideration, right? In order to let the other person be and not trying to convince another person.
Yeah.
Does it make sense?
And yeah, but like letting go doesn't mean you have to let go of a relationship just because you have different beliefs. I just mean that, like, you know, going with the theme of Aquarius is I feel like it's like this bigger picture perspective. And if you can't see that majority of people are walking around with a bunch of false perceptions, even a bunch of beliefs that are keeping them in denial, you know, that's just the state of the world. That's the way it is, you know, and we have to be able to accept people for that and understand that there's almost like it's a coping mechanism for them. It's like, you know, this person made a reference to, you know, when family members follow New Age spirituality, false light, people are doing that to protect themselves from pain. So you have to understand and try and relate to the person, and don't do this like in a way that's obvious, but understand the suffering and the soul that's suffering that's there. And I have to do this myself because, you know, I used to have triggers around, and this, I worked through this pretty quickly, but in the first few months of this whole of 2020, I had major triggers around social justice wars, and I still keep boundaries around people who, you know, kind of follow in this kind of ideology. But at the same time, I have to understand this person is in pain. I can also find a part of myself that relates to where they were because I used to be there, you know. Again, finding this common humanity is like, this begins with us. So if we can touch to the common humanity in another person, you know, that's when the relationship at whatever level it's available to us can emerge, you know. There's very few people who are going to meet you exactly where you are with everything that you understand. And not only that, it's boring when you meet people who are like on the same page, you know.
I want to address what you just said. You know, this person mentioned about other partners, other people, friends getting into more in the new age deception, delusion, the spiritual bypassing, you know, believing themselves, overestimating their level of being. I'm already in 5D and I've transcended it all. I'm enlightened, whatnot. Or I'm a, you know, but they can also abuse the concept, which we also address in our in the course as well. You know, oh, I'm a wanderer, I'm a starseed, I'm a light being, I'm here to raise consciousness, I don't belong to humanity.
Yeah.
You know. Which I, by the way, as people know, have read my writings and you as well, I've taken a New Age pill years ago.
Yeah.
But reflecting back, I took the New Age pill because it was an unconscious reaction, as you mentioned, to my unconscious wounds and trauma.
Yeah, it's a symptom of developmental trauma, actually.
Exactly. So these people are like, you know, bypassing, suppressing it and trying to find a new identity in order to avoid the pain of what they're holding within themselves. Yeah. Right. And then especially that's a trap, like this identification. Oh, I'm a light worker, I'm a starseed, I'm this and that, I'm coming from 5, 6, 7D, right? Which the ego just loves to feed upon, right? To make yourself feel special, make yourself feel in a way because you were mirrored like that on the basic level, even in childhood. So you look for a new identity, for something that makes you feel special. Yeah. Right? And that is not to denounce these concepts. I've written about the concept of wanderers, starseeds, and all of that, which ties into the archetypal or the archetype of the bodhisattva to come back, you know, to help humanity in all of that. But the ego can easily hijack that. And it can also be an unconscious trauma response to get into those teachings. And especially then also within, you know, in relationship as well. Yeah. We can also, that's a whole other topic in itself. We don't have the time to get into right now, but the whole twin flame topic that's out there.
Yeah. Right? And like, oh my God, there's so many charlatans out there who are like literally promising people that they'll meet their twin flame and whatnot. Like, this is not something that a coach gets to decide for you, just so everyone's clear. You know, I think that for some people too, especially if you're the South Node in the 7th house, I know I'm getting into astrology here, but if you have the South Node in the 7th house or, you know, you need to actually be moving away from relationships. You need to develop your own individual identity. So there's some people, you know, on a soul level, what you need most to grow and learn is to move away from this obsession with relationships. Like, again, we need to break past this like kind of status quo program we have running. We're like, okay, I'm supposed to get married, I'm supposed to go to university, and then I'm supposed to meet someone I love, and then I'm supposed to have kids. All of these things in the age relationships in the age of Aquarius are up for question. You know, will that truly make you happy is the question. Is that the life you want to live? You know, you have to start asking yourself these questions. And again, you know, so there is no painless authenticity. So when family members follow this like new age spirituality, false light programming, I know because my, you know, members of my family definitely do that. Probably the original spiritual bypassers. I have to risk conflict with them if I were to speak my truth. And I've done that with them, And then sometimes I'm like, you know what? I can't even be authentic with you in a relationship because it's too like, it's just, there's no like, it's just not possible, And when I do it, we're not meeting on common ground. We just get into arguments. And so, we have to also just, it's great when we can express our authenticity in relationship. But if it causes friction, we also have to wonder, like, who are we really fighting against? Why do we feel we need to change this person's mind? Because the way that I see it, and we've kind of had this initiation of like going out with our dog and like kind of meeting everyday people who we wouldn't normally meet with, But what I always do with these people, and I don't know where their beliefs are at. Even though some people have shared some things that made me realize that they kind of bought into TDS and whatnot, but just meet the soul where they're at, just this is also this bigger picture perspective. If we can get beyond identifying with our beliefs or, what we think is going on in the world, like that's really the important piece, I feel, and that's the only level that you're going to be able to relate to someone who you think is, less conscious than you or asleep, which are obviously red flags to begin with. But we need to be able to relate to people as human beings.
Yeah. So, to close off this first hour, just a little takeaway. Again, let's see it, despite the craziness out there, as hard as it is within family, marriage, any relationship really, because all these are relationships, how we relate to anyone, with regards to the lockdown, the COVID stuff and all of that, and people's different views and the splitting and whatnot. But again, there's a silver lining. There's an opportunity to use this friction for self-inquiry, right? To take this is like fertile ground for the work, right? All your stuff coming up.
Yeah.
So you can fall into old patterns, blame the other outside world, trying to change your partner, take full self-responsibility, and reevaluate. Use it as an opportunity to take an inventory, literally, of your whole lives, your beliefs, your intentions, your dreams, hopes, whatever it may be, and your relationships. Take an inventory, right? And deep inventory in light of Aquarius themes, the bigger picture, where we're moving towards to.
What's the world aligned? You want to create too?
That's exactly. And then also, we also want to make clear that what we just spoke in this first hour is general quote unquote advice, because like you just mentioned as well, every situation is specific. Yeah. Every person is specific. Some people are, like you mentioned with the astrology setting, are maybe meant to be more like by themselves and work this out this lifetime. Others are more relationship driven. But within that, there can be traps. Some people can fall into like, overly focused on relationships, jump into relationship and being obsessed with that. Others can be so wounded and shut down, they mistake solitude into isolation and claim like, I need to be by myself. I don't want to be anybody. I won't find anyone. It's just me by myself. And that can be a trauma response as well, like this relationship avoidance, right? Yeah. Where the ego hijacks that as well and turns it into isolation because there's fear, unconscious fear to be truly vulnerable with another person because stuff will come up in a relationship. Yeah. Even from the esoteric Christian perspective, there's the fifth way of the polar couple, which will accelerate the evolution, the esoteric spiritual evolution of a couple who do spiritual work together, who are collinear. Yeah. But it's also not easy work.
And I think also a lot of people are desiring to learn through the mirror of a more conscious person. That's what they're looking for in their relationship. And then they want to turn their partner into their therapist, basically. Yeah. And the partner has zero skills in doing that, So you have to also like look at it practically, like seventh house in astrology rules marriage, one-on-one relationships. But you can also find that, and I think it's really healing and also very important to find, healers, coaches, therapists, astrologers who you can get that need met as well by. So you can, it doesn't necessarily have to be your partner that you're doing this work with. Although once you get to be on a certain path of self-knowledge, if your partner is like emotionally abusive and super unconscious, that will affect you. What I'm saying is that this desire to learn through the mirror of the other, which I think is where it's coming from, can be found in multitude of ways. For instance, like before we met, I worked with this medicine woman at the eco village I was looking at, and she mirrored back stuff about me that I wasn't able to see in myself. I also worked in group settings and family constellation therapy, like we're always looking for this partner to meet like all of our needs on multiple levels.
Yes.
Not always, but a lot of people are, and the fact of the matter, it's not going to happen. You have to find your community. You have to find containers. And this is also, just to close it off, the internet is an amazing tool right now, and we can use it intelligently, or it can use us basically. And we can use it to find like-minded people. We can use it to connect with people on that level, and I know a lot of us are longing for in-person connection, but this is kind of the reality of the situation. Not only that, if you live in a small town, like you have access to the entire world from your small town through this tool of the internet. So you can use it to connect with the people who are truly aligned with these deeper values. And I think that's really important for people these days.
And that ties into the age of Aquarius in the sense of Aquarius, values, so to speak. But I also wanted to say that with regards to, sorry, I lost my train of thought now. It's gone.
Yeah, it's okay. So can I?
I just wanted to say, generally. So, also, like we mentioned many times before, that's what you alluded to. There's only so much self-work you can do on your own. You need others to do the work.
Yeah,
you can
it's so critical.
very easily delude yourself, right? With doing the self-work by yourself. And I also wanted to just say what you mentioned about needs, trying to get all our needs met by one person. It's very childish. Only a narcissistic little child does that, which is their face, so to speak.
Yeah.
And it reminds me, like relationship therapist David Rico said something very important. It's when we do the self-work, developing the self-awareness to being able to differentiate unconscious or unfulfilled childhood needs we were never met. We all have. And then we try to get from our partner, which is way too much we cannot expect from our partner to fulfill, as opposed to healthy adult needs, right? We also want from our partner. So there's that difference, and we won't know the difference until we dive deeper. But
really,
I wanted to just close off.
Yeah.
We talk about in the second hour, we dive deeper.
Yeah. So I can say the topics we're going to talk about in the second hour.
Yeah.
So this is really, someone asked about fear of intimacy, how to lean into it. Also another person asked a really great question about, healing our sexual energy and not using it to amplify the kind of the negative vibrational energies on Earth. Also how we love to defend ourselves. That's actually a really big question. So defensiveness in relationships. Someone also asked about, the danger of these on a spiritual level of sexual transmitted demons when you go on these hookup sites and one-nighters.
And called interference in relationships in general. You can see what we approached was more from a psychological, somatic perspective, shadow work. And then you can see the same issues from an occult, hyperdimensional perspective as well, where we can be vectored away by a partner who's not on the same page, so to speak.
And just to close it off, again, I'm really trying to make people aware, because I know people wait on things, is that this is the last round of Embodied Soul Awakening that Bernhard and I are going to do, where you're going to be working with us live in person. So, again, with these themes, if you're feeling like you want to connect with more conscious people who are on the path, we've created a container for that to happen, So also ask yourself, if you're listening to this podcast, do I really want to open up and do this kind of work with people? Because it's really beautiful watching the process of just, I feel like you and I are kind of creating this age of Aquarius within this, where people are gathering together who are truly interested in self-work. We're from all over the world, but we're on this common path where we're like, okay, we're willing to do this deeper work. We're willing to take ownership of our triggers. And it's amazing. I can't even tell you what kind of stuff happens when you have a community who's doing this work for you. And it does affect your relationships completely directly. I notice a lot of people, when they move on from our retreat, when they move on for coaching, they're able to open up to a deeper level of intimacy in their relationships. So, you also got to ask yourself a question too at a certain point. Do you really want to awaken, or do you want to be comfortable where you are, And a lot of people try to make bargains with that. And I'm not saying that Bernhard and I are going to awaken you. I'm just saying that that's your own individual choice to make, because and Adyashanti talks about this. is people try to awaken and they try to make a bargain, and they're like, okay,
he literally said, like, he made the question, people always said they really want to awaken, but what they're really saying is that they want to be happy in their dream life.
Yeah, and awakening happiness and awakening are two different things, basically.
Exactly.
So that's the question to really ask yourself, and there is no painless awakening, just like there's no painless authenticity.
Exactly.
So
yeah, and that's so again, like in our course Embodied Soul Awakening, it's really a holistic, integral approach of bringing many every areas into it, and we not only talk approaching the necessary inner work, but also the outer work. We're putting in the context of what's happening in the world, the bigger picture perspective from the matrix perspective and the evolution of consciousness. And with regards to relationship, we have a whole module that focuses just on that topic, and we're going very, very deep with these relationship topics we just talked about in the first hour.
Yeah, exactly.
So we go a bit deeper.
And then,
Yes?
tell them the URL to apply is www.awakenapply.com. Please tell us a little bit about yourself. Make it a sentence. Don't put a few words.
Yeah.
And because I also just want to say, and the reason I'm really telling people about this is because after this, we're going to restructure the course we're offering. We're going to remove ourselves from it, because I feel like we need time for our own personal life and to regenerate. Like we've really gone hard in service to others during this period. And we love it. Like I love creating communities where people can talk about these things, because actually I'm living my purpose through seeing what I don't see in the world. I see what humanity needs. And then we create that, for others. And it's beautiful. So we are going to kind of withdraw a little bit from working so intimately with people after this. And so if you want that opportunity, please come and join us. We would love to have you there.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, if you're not already a member, the second hour is for members. You can sign up at veilofreality.com. That is my website. And also sign up if you enjoy our work, our shows, because we have, as I said, this is the 50th podcast show, and we've gone consistently releasing those shows every 2 weeks. Yeah. This also takes a lot of work and energy besides everything else we're doing. So we would obviously very much appreciate your support. And with that being said, we wish you guys a good start into the next round, 2021. See you guys on the other side.